So, back in 2001, a little animated movie that came out that a lot of people talked about because of how cool, innovative the whole concept was a little movie called Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Now, this movie is a movie that I remember having on VHS and putting it in and watching it. I probably watched the movie several times on VHS. And, I remember having the tube TVs and being able to, watch this movie and always, mesmerized at this, group of people who were on this adventure to find Atlantis. And, Milo was a great character, really well written, and seeing him interact with these different people on this journey was awesome, and I loved that movie. I haven't watched it in a while, and I really do believe I need to go back and rewatch it. But in today's video, we are not talking about the past, and in fact, we're talking about the future of this movie in what I think will probably be my personal sort of fan cast of who could be the next people to do a live action version of this movie. And I think a live action version of Atlantis would be super, super cool. And I'm here to say, let's really dive deep into what actors could play these characters. Now, we do have to mention before going any further that the animated movie itself had some heavy hitters back then, in the form of Milo being Michael J. Fox. And going a little deeper into the movie, we also had the King of Atlantis, played by Leonard Nimoy. I mean, for those of you who aren't aware of who Leonard Nimoy is, he's Spock. Yeah, the guy who plays Spock. Amazing. The fact that they were able to get these people to be in this movie is amazing. But my thing is that this whole story came about when I saw people talking about they might be developing a new Atlantis movie, and they're thinking about who could play these actors, these specific roles. And recently I saw somebody put up a sort of mid-journey designed, kind of AI designed, photorealistic version of actors that could play these characters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these photos of these characters and kind of put them in their right place in a way. I'm going to say who I think should be playing these roles rather than what the AI decided to put in these roles. So let's start off with the titular character, the main character of the story, and that is Milo. Milo was decided, whoever it was that decided that Tom Holland should be Milo, I think is a good choice. Don't get me wrong. I think Tom Holland would make a really good Milo. But in my opinion, personally, apart from Tom Holland, I think somebody else who would make a really good Milo is Andrew Garfield. Now, don't get me wrong, Andrew Garfield may be 40 years old, but he doesn't look 40. You shave the beard, you give him the similar haircut to Milo, he can be a really good Milo. I mean, you look at him in the way that he acts in sort of Amazing Spider-Man. Perfect. I mean, he could be a great Milo. And honestly, even though both of them have played Spider-Man, it would be really cool to see him in a role like that. Now let's move on to another one of the cool members of this ragtag group, and that is Audrey. Now, Audrey, in this case, is represented by Jenna Ortega, which I think would be a really good Audrey, as a matter of fact. I think she could play that role really well. She's one of the more modern actresses around and could really represent this role in a great way. But personally, for me, and this is a name that has been thrown around before for this role, and that is none other than Michelle Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez would annihilate this role. She has that mannerism. I mean, if you see her in Avatar, she is pretty much what Audrey is. Like, if you see Michelle Rodriguez in that movie, in Avatar, you see pretty much who Audrey is, and that would make for perfect fan casting in this situation. And the next member of this team would be Dr. Sweet. Now, the AI in this case is representing Michael Clark Duncan. Now, unfortunately, Michael Clark Duncan passed away a few years ago. He was a fantastic actor, and I think he would have been the perfect person for that role. There is no doubt about it. But I think now, specifically speaking to people who are alive and could play this role, I think Mike Coulter could play this role. I think he has the perfect mannerisms. He can play a doctor really well. I mean, you see him as Luke Cage, but you could totally see him as a doctor and having that specific style that we're looking for Dr. Sweet, who is really sweet, by the way, in the movie. But he would make a fantastic Dr. Sweet. Now let's talk about one of the two really weird members of this whole team, and that is Moliere. Now, Moliere in this case is being represented by none other than Josh Gad. Now, Josh Gad fits perfectly for this role. I mean, I can't think of another actor that could play that role perfectly. Now, we do have, people coming in, like, further down the line that you will see that I will have to say that is a perfect casting. So in this specific case, yes, Josh Gad is the perfect choice for this role, and I think he would annihilate this role. Now, let's talk about Cookie. Cookie, in this case, is being represented by Jim Carrey, and man, I can't think of another actor that could do Cookie that well. And man, I have to agree, Jim Carrey would make for a perfect Cookie. He can have those mannerisms, the movement, the body movement that Jim Carrey normally, brings to a role, and he can totally play that sort of like grumpy, almost like wacky, Western kind of grandfather. And that would be really cool to see Jim Carrey in such a far different role in his career, and this would be really cool to see. And of course, we can't forget to talk about none other than our favorite demolition expert, Vinny. Vinny in Atlantis is probably one of the funniest characters because he has zero expression, and employing someone like Pedro Pascal to play that role would be honestly hilarious because it's so different than what Pedro Pascal is. He could probably have put in the accent into Vinny, and Vinny does have an accent. So having him play that role, and honestly, Pedro Pascal comes in with a built-in mustache for this role, just like he has a mustache in The Mandalorian, but he would have a much more pronounced mustache, and that would look very cool and interesting. I can't really think of someone that could play that role in modern times, in a more modern setting, but he can play that role pretty darn good if you ask me. And finally, let's talk about technically the final member of this ragtag team, and that is Mrs. Packard, who is represented here as Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, let's take a breath, okay? We have seen what Jamie Lee Curtis is capable of, and the best comparison that I would have for this character that she would theoretically be playing is her character in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was a great film, by the way. And in that movie, she plays this sort of tax person, like I think she works for the IRS or something, a tax collector. I think that's what she plays again. And in that role, she has this feeling about her that is kind of like, yeah, what do you want? That sort of like almost, grungy feel to it. And Mrs. Packard is similar to that, except she'd be more, she'd have a little bit more heart in her. And I think Jamie Lee Curtis is a great choice for something like this, for something that really grabs people and actually introduces them to somebody that is very much fit for the role. And Mrs. Packard needs that sort of feeling to her. She's going to be grungy, but she's also going to have a whole lot of heart. And I think Jamie Lee Curtis definitely has those qualities to bring something like that to this role. So we're finally getting to our last 3 characters that are fan cast. And now we're talking about characters outside of this sort of ragtag bunch, and who I think could also be different actors you might be surprised by. So let's start off with none other than Helga. Now, Helga, in this case, is being represented by Margot Robbie. Now, Margot Robbie would fit really well with this role. I think she is, a really great actress. She recently just came out of Barbie, which was an absolute success. But there's also another actress that I think could fit for this role almost perfectly, and that would have to be Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie would play this role like a master, and she could bring something really unique and fun to that role. Now, let me reiterate, Margot Robbie is also another great actress to play this role, and I think both have equal qualities that they could bring to this very interesting and very intriguing character that we think is on, the enemy side, but later on she kind of redeems herself, and this would be the perfect opportunity to bring Margot Robbie or even Angelina Jolie into the mix. Now let's talk about the man who actually brings weight to Atlantis, the movie, and that is Commander Rourke. Commander Rourke is definitely a role that you need to be very careful when casting, because if you don't put someone there who has that grit, that veracity, and also has some form of charisma to that role, it falls flat. Similar to what we saw with Sully in Uncharted. Now, in this case, it is being represented by Stephen Lang. Stephen Lang, I have to say, is a fantastic actor. So much so that I liked him as Sully in the Sully short film, which, believe it or not, I still think it was better than, the regular movie. But nonetheless, we're not talking about Uncharted. We're talking about Atlantis, and I think he does a really great job in being Commander Rourke in this case. Now, having said that, if we can get someone else as well who could equally be as good in the role, and I would probably have a slight edge in wanting in that role, would have to be Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones would be the closest thing to perfect that this role could have, and it would make me so freaking happy. But nonetheless, if we can't have Tommy Lee Jones, I would still be very happy if we had Stephen Lang in that role. And finally, the heart, the soul, the beauty of this movie, the woman that Milo was looking for technically all his life, this over 100-year-old woman from this very lost city. I think she's over 100 years old. I don't know if she is, but she is from this very lost city, and is now here to be represented by none other than Zendaya. Now, Zendaya, I get why they chose Zendaya, because like with Milo being Tom Holland, it would be a really good chemistry between the two of them. So I understand why they put Zendaya in that role. But for me personally, I don't think Zendaya would be the good Kira. She could play the role, fine, but I don't see her in that role. I see the only person that could easily play that role and make it as convincing as possible, because she ultimately kind of looks like the character herself, and that is Sofia Boutella. Sofia Boutella would be a fantastic actress to play that role and be the Kira that we need. I mean, we've seen her play these sort of different characters, in The Mummy, or we've seen her, in movies like Star Trek, where she transforms herself in these roles. And I think it would be really nice to just have something that Sofia Boutella could be in that just really brings in her acting prowess, because I really do believe she is a fantastic actress and definitely deserves to be in a Disney movie like this. Whew. Yes, I am slightly exhausted and a little bit sweaty after going through all of these, but let's be honest. Everything that we have talked about here today is all a fan casting. These are all my personal opinions as to the people that could play these roles. And sometimes I could be wrong. I might even be wrong about my choices as to who could be perfect for these roles. Now, I really personally would like to see a live action version of Atlantis. And after so many people have talked about it, I think that they should. I think that Disney should invest in it. Don't know if it would go straight to movie theaters, but even if it would come just directly to Disney Plus, I'd still be down for something like that. So yeah, I am very much happy with the choices that I have made. But like I said, I may be wrong. And that is something that I have to ask you. Am I wrong? Is that something that I may have gone a little too far on? Or are these fan castings precisely on the nail? I don't know. I have to hear from you guys. I have to know what you guys think. So if you guys want to, carry on this conversation, let's go talk in the comments below. Tell me what you think of Atlantis and what the final casting call would look like for this movie in live action. And while you're down there in the comment section, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live on this channel. And thank you guys so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next video.